People in the eye of the media have a social responsibility. I think Gary Lineker is quite right to have expressed, to have voiced concern about Suella Braverman's new bill, and to make it clear that there are people in our country who do not automatically accept the bill and the implications of it, and indeed I would say it's terribly clear that she would talk about the huge the cost to the taxpayer of the migrants who are coming across from France, who are coming across the Channel, and this, of course, is not true. The cost to the taxpayer is the go slow by the Home Office, the hostile environment that Mrs May instituted, the incredibly slow process of processing these people, including Afghans who should have been processed by now and should have received their full asylum options. Again, so much of this is the responsibility of our government. I think Gary Lineker is quite right. Immeasurably cruel policy directed at the most vulnerable people in language not dissimilar to that used by Germany in the 1930s, but also used by us. Let's listen to what
Gary Lineker said. His comments are getting some coverage in the newspapers this morning. What do you think of what he had to say about these plans?
I'm disappointed, obviously. I think it's unhelpful to compare our measures, which are lawful, proportionate, and indeed compassionate, to 1930s Germany. I also think that we're on the side of the British people here. It's plain for anyone to see that the British people have had enough of this situation of thousands of people coming here illegally at huge cost to the taxpayer and undermining our laws and, in fact, the British generosity.
All of that is open to question, and I think we need people to be prepared to stand up and question these things. Has Gary Lineker broken the impartiality rules? Well, probably, but those rules are absurd, and other people break them as well. Eventually people have to stand up. If that means he loses his job, well, that's his responsibility, and that's reasonable. He will draw attention to something. The BBC's interpretation of impartiality is bizarre. And sometimes it draws attention to people who should not be given airtime simply because of its obsession with impartiality. I don't see it being hugely impartial to people, to the memory, for example, of Mrs. Thatcher. It's taken a particular journalistic approach there, and to vilify Thatcher. It may be justified, but it's hardly impartial. I think people in public life have a duty to speak out, whether they are ex-footballers or ex-prime ministers. They have a duty to speak out about things which are clearly of concern, and Gary Lineker is one of those. Gary Lineker is one of those. Keir Starmer is another. And Keir Starmer would say that maybe this wasn't the best way to make an argument, but it is a way to make an argument, and it is a way to stimulate debate, and that is what needs to be done at this moment. And we need to stimulate debate about the assumptions Suella Braverman is putting out again and again and again. This is a compassionate approach. It isn't. There are other approaches we could take. If we want to protect people from making this heinous crossing over the English Channel, then we would set up centres in France to process people on that side of the Channel. And I'm sure France would be only too happy to shoulder that responsibility with us to protect lives. But we're not emphasising that, and that's not what Suella Braverman and her office wish to emphasise at the moment. What they wish to do is to pander to the very worst excesses of the far right and the obsession with immigration which drove us towards the Brexit decision in the first place. It's that obsession, frankly, that racism, which I think lay underneath UKIP and now is invading the heart of the Conservative Party. It's not something I want to have anything to do with, certainly. It's not something I will ever condone. And I think it's fundamentally wrong. She knows that she's lost the Albanian story because there are now far fewer Albanians crossing the channel. She can no longer thump on the dispatch box about an invasion. There is no invasion from Albanians. The invasion, if she wants to use it, is from Afghans. Well, she knows that's not going to be a story that will sell because she and Dominic Raab are responsible for that invasion because they didn't deal with it at the time, in the same way as they didn't deal with Dublin III, in the same way as they didn't deal with Northern Ireland. This is about the stupidity and the irresponsibility of Boris Johnson's government, of Mrs. May's government, and of course Liz Truss. We can't be distracted from the real issues. The real issues are not immigration. The real issues are the cost of living, education, the NHS, the failure of the main parts of our society. And if we wish to scapegoat foreigners among us, then we are literally replicating the language and the behavior of Nazi Germany.